The first time Amara Diallo cried in Seoul, she was standing in a convenience store at midnight, holding a cup of instant ramen she didn't know how to read the instructions for. She was 27 years old. She had left Lagos with 2 suitcases, a scholarship to study fashion design at a Seoul Arts University, and a quiet, broken heart she refused to talk about. She told everyone she left because of opportunity. That was only half the truth. Seoul was everything Lagos was not, and nothing like she expected. The city moved fast. The people moved faster. Everything was organized, clean, polite, and yet she had never felt more alone in her life. Nobody looked at her the way people back home looked at each other. Nobody lingered. Nobody asked her how her mother was doing. That night in the convenience store, a young man walked in. He was tall for a Korean man, with tired eyes and hair that looked like it hadn't been combed since Tuesday. He picked up the exact same cup of ramen she was holding, turned it over, and read it without even thinking. She watched him. He didn't notice her at first. Then he looked up and froze. "Oh, sorry, am I in your way?" His English surprised her. It was good. Not perfect, but real. "No," she said. I cannot read this." He looked at the cup in her hands. Then he looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, not pity. Something quieter. He took the cup gently, turned it to the back, and read the instructions aloud. His name was Park Jiwon, and that was how it started. They didn't exchange numbers that night. But Seoul is strange that way. It keeps bringing you back to the same places. 3 days later, Amara saw him again. This time at the Han River, sitting alone on a bench with his shoes off and his feet dangling over the grass, staring at the water like it owed him an explanation. She sat nearby, sketching in her notebook, designs, fabrics, the way a woman's shoulder blade looked when she turned away. She didn't say anything to him. She wasn't sure he would remember her. But he looked over. "Ramen girl," he said. She laughed. It was the first real laugh she had laughed since arriving in Korea. "Fashion girl," she replied. He smiled. It was small and careful, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to use it. They talked until the sun went down and the river turned gold. He told her he was a structural engineer who secretly wished he had become a musician. She told him she was a fashion student who secretly missed her grandmother's kitchen more than anything in the world. "Do you like it here?" he asked. "Seoul, I mean. I like it more today than yesterday," she said honestly. He nodded like that made perfect sense. From that evening forward, they became something that had no name yet. They met at the river. They walked through Insadong together on weekends. She taught him how to say things in Yoruba, the way you greet an elder, the way you express something that has no translation in any other language. He taught her how to read Korean menus, how to bow correctly, how to eat tteokbokki without her eyes watering. It was easy. It was terrifying, because the easiest things always are. Korea noticed them. Not everyone. Not always. But enough. There were the sideways glances on the subway. The woman at the restaurant who spoke to Jiwon about the menu as if Amara wasn't there. The man outside a shop in Hongdae who made a comment in Korean, fast and low, thinking she wouldn't understand. She didn't. But she saw Jiwon's jaw tighten. "What did he say?" she asked quietly. "Nothing important," Jiwon said. Jiwon. He was quiet for a long time. Then, he said we looked strange together. She didn't cry. She had heard things like that before, in different cities, in different languages. What surprised her was what Jiwon said next. "Thought we looked perfect," he said. "For what it's worth." She looked at him. He was staring straight ahead, hands in his pockets, jaw still tight. But his voice had been so steady, so sure. That was the moment she knew. She wasn't falling anymore. She had already fallen. But falling in love across cultures is not just about the 2 people in the middle of it. It is about everyone standing around them. Jiwon's mother called him the week after they made it official. Amara was in the next room. She couldn't understand the Korean, but she understood the tone. Sharp. Worried. A mother's voice stretched thin with concern. Later, Jiwon came and sat beside her on the floor with his back against the sofa. "She wants to meet you," he said. "Is that good news or bad news?" Amara asked. "Both," he admitted. The meeting with his mother was not a disaster. It was something worse. It was polite. Jiwon's mother, Mrs. Park, was formal and careful and kind in a way that felt like a closed door. She asked Amara questions about her studies, her family, Nigeria, all with a smile that said, "I am trying. But also, I am not sure." When Amara used the formal Korean greeting she had practiced for 2 weeks, Mrs. Park's face softened. Just barely. Just enough. It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. 6 months in, Amara noticed something. Jiwon was pulling away. Not all at once. Not with a fight or a cold silence. He was doing it the way a tide goes out, slowly, so slowly that you don't notice until you're standing on wet sand wondering where the water went. He canceled plans. He answered her texts more slowly. When they were together, he smiled. But there was something behind his eyes that she could not reach. She asked him directly, the way her mother had always taught her to ask. Look the person in the eyes and ask. Jiwon, talk to me. What is happening with you? Nothing. I'm just tired. You have been tired for 3 weeks. He looked at the floor. She watched his hands grip each other in his lap. There are things. He started. Things that are complicated. Things I need to figure out. Alone? She asked. He didn't answer. And that silence, that terrible, careful silence, broke something between them. She gave him space because she respected him. But the space grew. And one evening, walking home from her studio alone, Amara Diallo asked herself the question she had been avoiding. Was she not enough? Was she too much? Was it her skin, her language, her accent, her laugh that was too big for this quiet city? Was she a chapter in his life? Or was he trying to tell her the chapter was ending? She went home that night and held herself together with both hands. She did not call him. She did not cry. She opened her sketchbook and she drew. She drew until the feeling became lines on a page and the lines became a dress. The most beautiful dress she had ever designed. A dress the color of a river at sunset. A dress that looked like a goodbye. 2 weeks later, Jiwon called her. Can you come to the river? The bench where we always sit. Please. His voice was strange. Not cold, something else. Like a man standing at the edge of something very high, deciding whether to jump or walk back. She went. He was already there when she arrived. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman beside him. Older, in her 60s, sitting in a wheelchair, wrapped in a coat despite the warm evening. The woman looked up at Amara with the sharpest, brightest eyes she had ever seen. Amara stopped walking. This is my Halmiani, Jiwon said quietly. My grandmother. The old woman reached out her hand. Amara took it, her heart beating fast, not understanding. The grandmother spoke. Jiwon translated. She says, she has been asking to meet you for months. I kept saying it wasn't the right time. What? Amara asked. Jiwon sat down heavily on the bench. He rubbed his face with both hands. The gesture she knew meant he was about to say something that cost him. 3 months ago, my Halmiani was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. She doesn't have long. And she made me promise. She made me promise before she got worse, that she wanted to see me happy. Really happy. Not polite happy. Not dutiful happy. His voice broke. Just slightly. He caught it. She said, Jiwon, that girl. The African girl you keep mentioning when you think you're being subtle. Bring her to me. Amara's hand went to her mouth. I was pulling away because I was scared, he said. Not of you. Of this. Of loving you so much while everything else around me was falling apart. I didn't want to ask you to carry that. I didn't want you to see me like a person, she said. He looked at her. I came here alone, she said, her voice soft but steady. I crossed an ocean alone. I learned to eat alone, sleep alone, be afraid alone. And you thought I couldn't handle being with you? The grandmother made a sound. A small, certain sound. Jiwon translated again, his eyes wet. She says you have a strong back. She says she can tell. She says only women with strong backs stand like that. Amara sat down on the other side of the old woman and held her hand. She didn't speak. The river moved quietly below them. The city hummed its usual song. And somehow, in the middle of grief and fear and a love that had almost been lost to silence, something was repaired. Jiwon's grandmother passed away 41 days later. On a Tuesday morning, quietly, with her family around her. Amara was there. She held Jiwon's hand through the funeral in a way that needed no translation. She bowed when others bowed. She sat in silence when silence was needed. And when the formal gathering was over and the relatives had gone home and Jiwon sat alone in the empty house with his head in his hands, she sat on the floor beside him and put her hand on his back. Not speaking. Just there. His mother watched from the doorway for a long moment. Then she walked over, quietly, and placed a bowl of food beside Amara. It was a small thing. A bowl of soup. A silent offering. But in that family, in that culture, in that moment, it meant, you are not a stranger here anymore. Months passed. Amara finished her final collection for her degree. 12 pieces, each one inspired by a different moment between her and Jiwon. The river dress was the centerpiece. She wore it herself on the day of the showcase. Jiwon sat in the front row. He did not understand fashion the way she did. But when she walked out onto that floor and he saw what she had made, what she had turned all of that love and pain and distance and reunion into, he pressed his fist to his chest like something had hit him there. Afterward, outside, in the cold Seoul night, he stood in front of her. "You made all of that," he said. "Out of us?" "I make things out of what I feel," she said simply. He was quiet. Then, "Amara, I want to be the reason you feel things for a long time." She looked at him. This man who had almost let fear cost him everything. This man who had held his grief alone for too long. This man who had once read ramen instructions to a stranger in a convenience store at midnight. "Then stop going quiet when things get hard," she said. "I'm learning," he said. "Good," she said. "So am I." And right there, on a cold Seoul street, under lights that buzzed and people that passed without looking, she took his face in her hands, and she kissed him. Not a beginning, not an ending, a continuation. What Amara did not know, what she would only discover much later, when she was cleaning out her studio and found an old sketchbook at the back of a shelf, was that on the very first night she had arrived in Seoul, she had pulled out that same book on the plane and written one sentence at the top of an empty page. A sentence she had forgotten completely. It said, "I want to meet someone who makes me feel like I did not come all this way for nothing." She stared at those words for a very long time. Then she looked up at the photo pinned above her desk, Jiwon and her at the river, laughing at something neither of them could remember. She put the sketchbook down. She picked up her phone. She called him. When he answered, she said only 4 words. "It worked," she said. "What worked?" he asked. "Coming here," she said. "It worked."
If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, comment and subscribe for more stories.